Radio Spaetkauf. Berlin News in English.
It is April 25th, 2024. This is a special episode of Radio Spaetkauf. We are taping live at the House of Color in Kreuzberg. We've paired with the Europäische Academy Berlin to present a special series where we look at difficult topics that are fascinating, and try to pull ourselves away from the news where we focus on what's gone wrong a little too often. And for fans of, for instance, how to F up an airport, things going wrong can give us a lot of great material. But we want to take a perspective where we consider our present and our past to try and imagine what we really want from Berlin. In this series, I was just sort of inspired by the fact that we've spent a decade or more mostly griping about Berlin, and then interspersing that with saying, oh, but we love it, but this is all the things we hate about it. And I just wanted to focus on, okay, well, what do we really want? So we've paired with experts from Berlin and from beyond to try and answer those questions one at a time. Our previous episode was on finding homes for those without them. And today we're going to be talking about sharing public spaces, creating public spaces that we share, why they work, why they don't, what we really want from them, what we think we want from them, why we're not getting it. It's a lot to bite off, and we're going to probably finish this episode feeling like there's a lot more to discuss, and that's intentional because there will inevitably be that, and there'll be roads we can go down on our own later. So I also want to welcome our lovely audience that is here tonight, who have very, very authentically identified themselves here. When I talk about public spaces, that's my own nomenclature. I'm sure that urban planners have a better way of saying it, but what I'm getting at is the central squares, the places where we meet, the places where we play, the places where we gather. Things that are accessible without a ticket, places that anyone could enter should they wish. So that could be something like Times Square. It could be something like Görlitzer or Tempelhof. It could be something like Alexanderplatz, that is an iconic building, but maybe nowhere to really hang out and have a meeting point, despite the fact it's the only thing we know. Around the world, there's all sorts of places that we can engage in for sport or for hiking or for, I don't know, buying drugs. There's a lot of different uses for all of these places, and some of them come about accidentally, and some of them come across through thorough planning. And some of our most successful ones are just empty places that people filled the way they wanted to, and some of our greatest failures took decades of planning. And of course, there's inverse of both of those. My guests today are going to help us to sort of examine that and figure out what we want, what we might want, what we don't want, and what's the deal with Potsdamer Platz? After studying politics in Newcastle back in his native UK, our first guest decided to spend 6 months exploring Berlin's history. As so many before him who have spent 6 months in Berlin, it turned into slightly more. After 14 years and acquiring a German citizenship, sharing his love of Berlin with thousands of people as a tour guide, and more recently, his popular social media accounts, please join me in warmly welcoming to Radio Spaetkauf, Johnny Whitlam. Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah, welcome, Johnny. So, thank you for doing the show. Thank you. There's sort of a rich history in Berlin of podcasters / tour guides. I think there's something about I have knowledge and would like to share it that maybe is the common overlap there, but it's a remarkable one that also is a part of Radio Spaetkauf's history. Do you have a favorite shared space in Berlin?
Do I have a favorite one? Yes, I do. I was thinking about this today. The Paul-Linke-Ufer, Maybach-Ufer. Probably the Paul-Linke-Ufer side, even though I'm a Neukölln boy, really.
Okay. And what makes this space special? Let's start with to you, which is it's probably distinct from why it's special to the rest of Berlin.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty popular space down by the canal there, in case people didn't quite get it.
Right. Can you give us, for those of us who maybe don't know the cross streets, can you describe
it?
Yes.
Let's say you're walking south from Koppenstadtor, you get to the Ankerklause, or I never understood why people love that place.
Ankerklause?
Yeah.
It was there first. It's lovely. It's sort of
fine.
like it's hanging over the water.
Yeah, that's quite nice. No hate for it. Anyway,
yes.
When you get there, you take a look. Maybe people know the Brammerballs shop and the Turkish market I'm just going to mention
that you've gone through
things.
sort of like 3 generations of Berlin from Turkish market to burger shop to vegan donuts. This is where we find ourselves today.
You got to move with the times, man.
So, and why is that space special to you?
It's accidentally where I decided to spend most of my life here, I suppose. When I was first here in 2010, I was here for a week before I was here for 6 months. And on my last day here, I just went and sat down by the canal and read a book. And I was like, maybe I'll come back here. And so a month later, I started looking for jobs. And a couple of months after that, I was like on a one-way flight with like no money in my bank account, which still makes me scared when I think about it. But I was 21, and it's one of many stupid things that I did.
I think there's probably much more stupendously stupid things you could have done at 21 than fly to Berlin from across. It's not even a channel?
Yeah,
it's not even that much water. That's amazing. It's kind of fascinating because there's sort of a series of iconic bridges and meeting spaces along the canal there. Like it could have been Admiralsbrücke that changed your mind, or that beach in front of the hospital, or beach very loosely determined to be just any open space near water.
I love that you call it a beach. That's great. I'm too scared of the swans, man.
Oh, that's okay. Even if they do attack you, they're not that powerful.
You sound like you know.
Of course I know. I mean, why are you afraid of them?
It sounds like you've been fighting swans.
I never fought a swan. I'm faster than a swan. Let's put it that way. And I've definitely had to protect small children from swans at various times throughout my life. Awesome. Tell us a little bit about what you do in your day job.
In my day job is like insane because I'm self-employed. I feel you know this pain. It never stops, but I also love it. So I am ideally a tour guide. I do tours, 3-4 times a week. I also make a lot of videos about Berlin's history, which really took off. Like last year, I didn't expect that. I just thought, what are some stories I can tell that aren't on my tours? Because I was very naive, and I thought, well, what if people watch all of them, and then they come on a tour, and then they've heard all the things that I know.
Right. Yes. You don't want to burn your material.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that. People watch 2, and they're like, oh, that guy can do a tour.
Right. They just do their own tour. They come do your tour.
Then they're like, oh, that's fine.
That's much
we'll book
better.
him. So so I spent a lot of time reading books, going out and finding odd corners of the city and telling all sorts of, I guess, lesser known stories, which is why I think it maybe has resonated with people that live here in a way that I never expected, but I'm very thankful for.
Sure, and I think you never underestimate how little Berliners oftentimes know about the places that they go every day.
Don't overestimate what I know either.
Right. It took me a decade to just find out what the name, person that my street was named after. All right, we're gonna bring our next guest to the stage. Give it up for Johnny Whitlam, please. Joining us on the podcast now is the former head of spatial planning in Rotterdam, where he oversaw the reconstruction of the city center and ultimately was responsible for the future of the city and region. He teaches at the Academy of Architecture in Rotterdam and Amsterdam and is the author of many articles and books, including Rotterdam, People Making City. Please, another huge round of applause for Mr. Martin Aarts. Well, Welcome to the show, Martin. Thank you so much for coming in. And we chatted a little bit the other day. Right now, you told me you're working on a book. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I can. But my problem is I work for 4 years already on the book. So, I can, so if you have 4 years, but it's mainly about how should, or I hope cities change in the context of climate change. And not only technical, but for the better. So that it is better city for citizens and hopefully also animals and nature.
Right. Well, just because someone can't vote doesn't make them not an important part of the city.
I interviewed a lot of cities like Copenhagen, Paris, Barcelona, and others.
I noticed you skipped Berlin.
What?
Did you not?
No, because Berlin is the 8th of May.
Okay.
So I have to wait for that, yeah.
And
I had to work a lot for just getting an interview with somebody I know very well, but okay. And my main question is, what kind of city do you want to be? And to give an example for Rotterdam, in Rotterdam, I said, when I was chief there, I said, we want to be a city where children can go outside.
Right.
That sounds very easy.
Yeah.
But the consequence is that they can go outside in the streets and go to school and to play. So the cars have to slow down. And nature have to come in, because if you walk to school, there are trees, and the city heat has to be gone away. So trees, birds, everything. So it's also about then biodiversity. It is about city stress, heat stress, I mean. It is about the water management, because water will be it was already during some summers and some winters. There is too much and too little rain always. There's never enough. So all these problems come with the consequence. If you really want that children can go out,
right,
go from there.
So it's not so much children can go out, but maybe should go out.
I think so, but now there are cities where the parents bring their children with a car to the school, so it's
some
3
whole
times wrong,
yes.
say, yeah. But I have different answers. For example, a fantastic answer I had from on this question from Copenhagen. She said, Camilla, she said, we want to have a city which is so attractive that nobody should to go on holiday anymore.
So,
and that's also about nearby nature. Children can go everywhere. It's relaxed. You don't have to stress. So you don't have to say, okay, I live in a city, but 2 weeks a year?
Right.
Holiday. No, everyday holiday.
Oh, well, she should check out tropical islands.
She works on it. Huh?
It's, I mean, really, without leaving Brandenburg, you can fly around the world. Highly recommend it, especially if you love
I don't.
tattoos. Okay, thank you, Martin, for joining us, and I want to now welcome our third guest to the stage. She is a philosopher and historian whose project, Strassenverlauf, aims to make the forgotten experiences, destroyed hopes, and lost memories visible in everyday life. Her most recent guided tour of Berlin focused on Walter Benjamin and Siegfried Kracauer's Charlottenburg, linking the history of capitalism to urban development and how they describe the crisis of the Weimar Republic and the rise of National Socialism. Please, audience, a big round of applause for Lea Fink.
Spaetkauf. Berlin News in English.
Thank you for joining us. Maybe we can start by talking about a piece of Berlin that makes sense to you in terms of our discussion of shared spaces. I mean, let's maybe start with one that you think is successful.
For me, that's pretty hard to answer because mostly squares or public spaces that don't work pop into my mind.
Right.
But I thought about smaller places I like, where I think you could say that they are accessible in a way you described. And I thought about Körnerpark in Neukölln and also about Comenius-Garten, also in Neukölln.
What's that second one?
Comenius-Garten is a small garden project. It's close to Richardplatz, also at a site where Richardsburg was in the 20s, a tenement, Mietskaserne, where left-wing working-class people lived and got attacked by SR troops in the early 30s. And they got kicked out for a while, but after National Socialism rose to power, most of the residents had to flee or go underground. And now, in the 70s, the buildings were destroyed, and now there's this small utopia. It's a garden where...
I love that you went for, let me think of something that's kind of successful. It's a utopia. This is...
Let me explain.
Okay.
It's named after Comenius. It's dedicated to the Bohemian refugees who came here in the 18th century. And Comenius thought about education and tried to take children seriously. And the garden tries to do that as well. They do seminars there for small children from the neighborhood who not only learn about what are plants, but also can participate or carry out scientific experiments and learn about philosophy, history, literature there. And it's open to the public, but you have to be bussed in. So I don't know if that fits.
Well, yeah, that is an interesting question, because there's what is or isn't a barrier? What is an acknowledged barrier? What is a barrier that people set for themselves or subconsciously or for their fear of getting yelled at? It's all of those things I think go into that. How does one get buzzed in? Do you?
I'm not sure. But
you
just have to push a little button on the door and then you get buzzed in. I don't know if it's automatically or if there's a person somewhere, but during daytimes you get in.
Yes. Oh, at night less so because
And there are some rules. You can't drive a bike, for example, in there.
Okay.
Because they don't want the garden, the plants, the herbs, whatever, to be destroyed and want it to be a relaxed atmosphere.
I've not heard of a park to be buzzed in before, but when we're contemplating putting walls around other parks, maybe this is a nice way. It's just a turnstile. It can be like,
But I think in this case the rules are there to make it accessible and not to exclude.
Because if it was. How does that rule make it accessible?
The children and also the residents of the neighborhood, they take part. They participate in exhibitions there. There's a little stage. There are pictures on the walls, for example. And in order for that to not get destroyed, I think they established those rules.
I think that what you were just talking about, it touches on something interesting, because we're looking at a space that shows the way we've gone from building around factories to building around other types of things, our social needs or the service sector. Shows how we had a robust community on something that was planned and then a robust community post-bombing, which is how a lot of spaces grow in Berlin. Is there a way to have, and this is for anyone who wants to answer, is there a way or a place to have the kind of input and community-led growth that you get from an open space in a planned setting? Can cities build structures and platzes and get the kind of interactions that they get from an empty lot or someone establishing a market where there was nothing, from a former airport? I don't know.
A couple of things pop into mind for me. I think often these places that you're kind of imagining, I think the best ones are rather organic. Not in quite a literal sense every time, but I think, and I mean, I'm playing the "it was better when I got here" card, which is the most boring thing someone in Berlin can say. But the Tacheles and the garden behind it was amazing, and that came out of war and bombs, and like a lot of the thing was burned up in a Russian movie that was made there in the 1980s, and I think something quite unique and wonderful that you can't build came out of that. And then I compare it in my head to a place that maybe you, Martin, will know better than I do. There's a pre-planned part of Copenhagen, or next to Copenhagen, by the airport called Urestad, and it's very beautiful. There's loads of there's a Netflix documentary about some of the buildings there, I think, so people may have seen it without knowing. And there's all these
They can pause now and go watch it.
Yeah, everyone go watch it and just pull out your phone. There's these amazing, beautiful buildings there, and I spent a little bit of time there, and it is like a ghost town. It's just, I don't know, I feel like when you try and pre-plan something, you're very lucky if it turns into a place that people really love. But again, I'm really excited to hear what you say about that.
I agree. You talked about former airports like Tempelhof of Welt. And you can see after 10 years now that it is hardly used. Yeah, I know there's a lot of people, but you don't see them because they're all in the edges, and that's fantastic because they're occupied. So but I think you should help a little bit because it doesn't help biodiversity at all, and it even warms up the city because it's all lawn. And lawn we call in Holland ecologically green asphalt. Okay. So to help a little bit, for example, 1/3 of make wilderness or something, but choose some ideas. So add wilderness, of course, also keep one landing track to keep it on cultural agenda.
I thought you were going to say for
also
airplanes.
Nice, but also maybe some houses. I know it's the wrong party choose it, but I'm from the good party and also chooses that some people live there because then it's from the Berliners. So there must be more Berlin people in the surrounding. Now at the south part, it's like the end of the world. So it's too big. It was an airport.
Yeah, no.
And I was
these
on
are wildly controversial things you're saying.
And then near the airport building, it was kind of crowded. And then you saw 2 kilometers of nothing.
Right.
So I think, not saying we have Tempelhof Veld and we are the fantastic have this fantastic idea to do nothing. So lesson.
Right.
And
so
but I think you must of course analyze it, and after 10 years you can put some more ideas into the field.
Right. So you would like to see more forestation, but also really building residences on there.
Yeah, also, but not completely, and also not roundabout or something like we have this in the newspaper. It's always talked about rundum.
Right, they want to start at the outside and work their way until it's all
but it's kind of
condominiums.
stupid because nobody wants to live in a round thing. You want to live in Berlin, so you must build some part Berlinerish,
right?
And then go from there. But so more ideas, to put more ideas, and to maybe slowly, but not this. We keep it open, so this is our treasure. Because it's not a treasure, I think.
Is it
Enough?
Does anyone else have another opinion on that?
Yeah, I think my fear if we started to build on Tempelhofer Feld is that it would only be like those luxurious apartments nobody could afford, and that it wouldn't be social housing at all. But in some points I do agree, and I also would like to add some memorial sites there, because near to Columbia Dam, on Columbia Dam, there was a really early concentration camp where mostly political and homosexual prisoners were tortured and murdered. And there's a small plaque there, but
that's also adding.
Yeah, that's adding.
Think and adding, and I mean, in 2014, I was really very happy to say we don't do anything. It was like brilliant. But after 10 years, some ideas can pop up. I
Right.
mean, you cannot say we do nothing forever. So that's the only thing. So whatever you do, but think about it, analyze it, put some ideas in it, experiment, but not so lassen.
I mean, one of the things I think is interesting is Tempelhof gets used by a ton of people for a lot of different purposes. But unlike smaller spaces, there's very little interactions. People go there for a beer, they go there to kite surf or roller skate or garden or barbecue. And is there a way to make that a space where people interact more or cross or are not segregated? Is there a way to make a place that functions as a town square in the sort of mythical sense of it?
I mean, sorry to give you the opposite answer, but
Yeah.
like that's kind of the magic of the place, as it were, right? That you never stand so often in a place that's so empty, right? And so by that nature, you're like, well, you know when someone sits next to you on the U-Bahn, even though there's like plenty of other empty seats, and you're like, thanks, buddy. Cool. That's kind of what like going within 20 meters of someone is like at Tempelhof. So to do that, to create those kind of path spaces without building anything that's more than like 1 or 2 meters high, I think would be impossible. Sorry.
No. And so part of the reason why you don't have to go on leave your city is you've got a place to breathe.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I lived in Neukölln, it was a place that I convinced myself I could run around the edge of like everybody else. Turns out I can't. But nobody could see me fail because I was far away.
When we first started considering this episode, we had planned on taping really at Potsdamer Platz, which I lived around the corner from when I first moved to the city. And it's a sort of bizarre place. It looks sort of like maybe a few different sets of building toys fell together. That's a metaphor that works because I have 2 small children at home. But it sort of looks like someone put their blocks near their Duplos and by a transformer. And it was once, right, a bustling sort of central crossing place. It no longer is, and yet we still keep iterating and trying to find new ways to use it. I mean, maybe we should start by talking about what it once was.
To be honest, I'm not into that nostalgia about Potsdamer Platz so much.
By all means.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about the buildings now is how you described that they just don't work. They aren't really finished yet. They still have to build them because they didn't construct them right in the first place. And how the city wants to show off in a way, but also erases the history that happened there. To me, that's just not a good square or place to be. So I usually avoid it, to be honest.
Right.
So maybe you can help me
I
out.
don't get to avoid it because it's in guidebooks. And people think they want to go there. And to be honest, usually I go there with tour groups on a bus. So I can be like, yeah, we can go right through. And then we can, or just come through the other way. I don't know, Leipziger Straße, all good. Yeah. I think it is one of those things, it's a bit of a letdown. Like, I mean, I've sat with like 50 people behind me trying to be like, here's Europe's supposedly first automatic traffic light. You know, like it's woof. But I don't know. I kind of maybe I'm a lot more nostalgic than you. I'm attracted to the optimism of it. Right. That's quite an interesting thing. We tried to do something good without, really thinking about it too hard. I think they were very much impressed by the US, and they wanted let's have big tall buildings. That's what makes you successful. Right. And I can understand that feeling maybe in the 90s, but we don't have big sprawling suburbs, and we don't want everybody here to drive a car. So how did this really come about?
And when it was at its peak or its heyday, there wasn't a lot of car traffic going through there.
Yeah, you'd have to, you'd be driving your car and watching out for horses and pedestrians and all sorts of things. Yeah, absolutely. I do want to say something positive about it that just popped into my head though. Yeah, it needs a friend. I can be that friend.
No, I love it. I'll defend it as soon as I can get
I want it on a t-shirt. I love Potsdamer Platz. You can wear that. One thing that I think does change how it's interacted with is there used to be a big train station there. And like many train stations in Berlin, it was a terminus station, meaning the trains stopped. There was nowhere else for them to go, right? The train station that's there now is a lot more effective because you can pass right through, thanks to the RAF and the US Air Force. But that means it's also underground and you don't see it. And, sometimes you're just like on a Regionalbahn, you're like, oh, this does stop at Potsdamer Platz, and I do need the U2. This is great.
Yeah.
But otherwise it's not can you picture Potsdamer Platz station in your head?
Well, I mean, yes, but only because I've wandered around the interior being like, okay, I
Where do
know
I
which
go?
exit. I know which exit. I know which way to go. I can do this because I live here. Okay. Well, it's going to be near the bus, so I need to go over and no.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's some beautiful buildings there. There's things, you watch enough science fiction films, you'll see people running in and out of like the foundation of truth, but it's just a building adjacent there. I think the Sony Center is kind of marvelous in a way, like this sort of panopticon, people, glass, and cinema and all of these things and Legoland. It doesn't all come together as a place where you can sort of pass through or get off the train and find yourself and feel like you belong there. And there's so many pieces of it too, where there's an open green space, but you're not sure if you're supposed to play on it or roll down it or what happens if you fall off the other side. And there's giant seesaws, but they got locked down for some reason, which again is...
I think they're just, have you seen how big they are?
Yeah.
I reckon someone flew off the end. Man.
Yeah, but I thought in Europe that could just happen. It wasn't a big deal. I don't know.
You can break bones because healthcare is free.
Yeah, I don't know. They have parkour here. They invented it. But and that is like that. Also, that thing of equipment or a reason to go to a place. How do you, again, like Martin said, like be creative? Like giant seesaws, which I think they also wanted to put at the Humboldt Forum, is like, I don't know if that's a go-to thing, but I think we could do an even bigger one on Tempelhof. Again, if it's accessible.
But it's not about public spaces. I mean, it is just buildings.
Right.
So you go into buildings, and before, in years before, where do we meet? We meet in buildings. But now in this era, I think we want to meet in real public space, that we want to get the city back. So we want to take the city back as our place.
But do those have to be exterior? I mean, market halls, even malls to some extent
Yeah,
provide...
it is not bad. I mean, I don't say get rid of all the buildings because I'm an architect. But but I said that's buildings. So if you meet in buildings, you have to pay. There's always a commercial means. On public spaces, you can just meet. So that's the difference between plazas and parks. So I think we must forget about Potsdamer Platz. That's a building site. You have Paris Square. That's also not very attractive.
Platz.
I think it's really nicely ambitious to talk about Alexanderplatz.
Right.
Because everybody knows, and I'm lost every time. And I lived here. And still, if I have an appointment, because then I panic immediately. And I always run in the wrong way. And I always ran for the wrong Strassenbahn trams.
Right, or in front of them.
And so, to be completely clear, get rid of the cars, get rid of the stones, and try it all over again.
Start Alexanderplatz from
Make it
scratch.
a park or something nice, easy, birds, trees.
But do birds and trees alone make something?
Yes, make us happy. Yes.
But there are spaces even nearby each other in Berlin that are full of birds and trees that people will not go near, and there are others that are full of life that people walk through. So I don't think it's as simple as birds and trees near a TV tower. How do you make birds and trees something that not only invites people but also avoids, and there was a phrase I learned from one of you, informal exclusion. So the idea like, oh, am I allowed in there? So what, in your opinion, then creates a wild space that people want to play in?
I mean, it doesn't have to be so wild because it's in the middle of the city, but it can be also a playground for children. There can be water, and there can be a meeting point. So where you say, okay, we meet at Alexanderplatz, you know exactly where that is because it's attractive, it's well designed. So that's Alexanderplatz can be well designed. Wilderness is well well done, but it doesn't have to be obviously designed. So I don't have the solution for Alexanderplatz, but now it's forgotten. It's just traffic, and also on the square people crush. So even people are traffic there.
Okay, Lea?
But I think that it's not forgotten, but a hot political topic, to be honest, because especially like conservative forces in the Berlin government want to reconstruct the town as it used to be in the 18th and 19th century there. So I get what you meant with it's a forgotten space, because I always feel lost there, and I also like this experience in a way, to be honest. But it feels too big for human beings, and I agree that birds and grass could help out.
Right. I don't think that anyone's anti-bird necessarily.
Whoa.
I'm sure there's someone who's anti-bird, but we don't need their opinions heard. I mean, everyone has opinions. You know what? I don't want to take myself any deeper.
Why it's so important is, for me, the whole city has to be, nature comes in. So that's the very important task we're heading for. And the mayor of Paris, she explicitly says, we want to have nature in our city. That's how the next move.
Sure.
So it's not crazy idea. It's just an episode. But we need iconic examples, because we don't do that at one time. And Alexanderplatz is such a famous word, such a famous square, that even if it's awful, if you transform that into a very attractive place, everybody knows Berlin.
So around
this kind of icon. Oh, this is where Berlin is heading for, in this direction. So that's why entries and words and everything is important, because it belongs to the next phase of Berlin.
So the space around the TV tower should look more like the space around the Eiffel Tower?
I don't like the Eiffel Tower that much.
A lot of hot takes.
It's more about
Anti-Eiffel Tower.
The future of the Arc de Triomphe and the Champs-Élysées. The next phase after the Olympic Games, they start to redo the Champs-Élysées completely, and that will be transformed into what they call a garden. So not even a park, a garden. So where you feel at home, where you can do things.
Right. Seems like, you mentioned playgrounds for children, and I think that that's something where in Berlin I see like communities being built, people interacting from different backgrounds, mostly people who are or have children, because otherwise you're a creep. But basketball courts, sports things, are there other ways for people to create engaging public spaces, the kinds of things that might just happen on a bridge over time, but what are the kinds of spaces that you can build? Is it gardens? Is it, where people want to go?
It feels like the answer to that is Gleisdreieck. For me, the whole park there, I think you can go there several times before you've really worked out and explored every corner. That's partly because of the odd shape. It's built over a whole bunch of old train tracks, like it was never meant to be a park, right?
Right.
They go underground to Potsdamer Platz, you see? There you go.
Yeah.
Another star for your favorite place, your favorite part of town. In Gleisdreieck, actually, it's the birds and the trees that make the place. That's very nice, but it's not the place where people go. People go and hang out on the big lawn, which I just found out is actually bad for the environment. So, oops. I know. Don't worry. So when I lived around there, so near to here, Mehringdamm, I would go to that park on a weekend, and I'm grumpy, so I didn't like it as much on a weekend because of how well used it was, because I don't have children. And I was like, children are loud and they're here, but isn't it great, right? This is what this place was really built for. But it's not like a big play park that no one can enter. What they've done really well there is there's the main path that runs right through it. So you've got to go past all of these families and people having a nice time. And there's a cafe on the other side. And then there's the part with the trees where you can follow one of several different paths to walk through there and get some shade and get some quiet time. I think it's a really, really amazing and well thought out space.
And it borders onto new buildings.
Yes.
And runs through a bit of the middle. And Lea, this is a question for you, is this a place where sort of capitalism and public spaces can succeed and interact? Is that incongruous?
I'm not sure if I can answer this question, but I wanted to say something about Gleisdreieck because at that point I am a bit nostalgic, to be honest. I remember Gleisdreieck Park before it was Gleisdreieck Park, just like wasteland in between a golf course, I think. And there was a lot of prostitution in this area. And my father lived there when I was a teenager, and I visited the city. And I collected those golf balls, and I think I saw too many condoms laying on the ground.
Right. It sounds like you saw definitely, I think, too many, yes.
But it was a square that was not used, and because of that it was free to become something else, and many children played there, many teenagers went there to hang out, to escape what was expected of them in a way. And I think that I'd like to preserve some of those squares that aren't really squares, because I get the ideas about how we need those public spaces that can be used in a certain way, but especially thinking about what you said about commerce, I think it's also good if we planned cities, but planned that we are going to leave something out of urban planning. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think it does. Is there something that still exists that fills that space for you, so to speak?
I'm really bad with good examples.
That's fine. I mean, it is interesting that it was a time, there was parties, there was empty, in a way, like a more open Tacheles or whatever. I mean, by the way, Tacheles now is...
It's a very different
words.
place.
It's you can walk right in there and think, "Oh, I should leave." No, I've had lovely experiences there. It's a rêve combination. Yes, you were Johnny.
Oh, I could maybe think of there is still a small part of the place you were talking about that still feels a bit like that. I might say, in an opinionated fashion, a little bit sketchy. And that's behind the Helweg. That's like where you'll find one of the Yorkstrasse S-Bahn stations.
Yeah.
And if you follow the path up behind there, that kind of leads to the Tempodrome or so, that's still like, what happened here?
Yeah.
Or what didn't happen here, I suppose.
But unfortunately, that's not the part of my youth.
But it's right next to it.
That is funny. As that weird little island of not sure what it's betweenness there, or liminal sort of urban, not urban. Does remind me of the places as in my childhood you would go to play, where like there were sticks and stones and things like that.
There are signs saying "Don't stand on this; it might collapse." And there's no fence or anything. So it is quite a forgotten place in that way.
Are there spaces that we still have that you talked about, Martin, about thinking more creatively, and you talked about missing these empty spaces. Are there spaces that exist in Berlin that we're not using? Our rooftops or our alleyways or the tunnels beneath the city? Are there spaces, for instance, the Radbahn, it was celebrated their opening today. The space underneath the U1's being transformed into a space for bikes, and they just opened their test site today. And the same team talked about transforming the A100 into a stacked garden space. And it's all very fun. Are there other places we're not considering?
Maybe it's not what you mean, but I know Ernst-Reuterplatz very good because my son studied there for half a year, and I know friends who lecture there, and I've been there. And then I always amazed about thousands of students go from one institute to another building, the canteen, and this Ernst-Reuterplatz is a roundabout, only cars, and in the middle it's so-called public space, but not for public. And so I suggested once in a lecture for the Bund Deutsche Architekten to make it a garden, like I suggested. I had the whole track till Alexanderplatz to make it a garden. So,
and that was
because
why did they reject that?
I mean, there are thousands of students. If this is a garden, they use it. they meet, they do everything. They take the laptop, they can, I mean, there's so many summertime days there, and even in winter you can be there. And it's now just for cars. And it is just such a waste of space, but it is also uncomfortable. You put your jacket high to go from one building to another building. And there are students, they like to go out, they like to lay on the grass, they like to do everything what's forbidden also. And so it will be absolutely a success. And now it's just for cars. And that could be also a conic square, Platz, because all the foreign students come there, all the German students come there. So for them, it's part of Berlin.
Right. So, Lea, when we think about using these spaces and part of what we need to do is consider the statement we're making, like what is the philosophy we're projecting, or is that part of the decision we're making is not just how well it works, but displaying our intentions?
In a way, I in my project Strassenverlauf, I try to grasp a certain image of the city, and I don't want to resurrect a past that has been gone and can't be saved or can't be preserved, but I want to grasp an experience, an historic experience that has something to do with us. And the philosophers who thought mostly about what cities and architecture mean in this historic sense, for me are Walter Benjamin and Siegfried Krakauer, the ones with the really bad names.
I feel like, having heard you do it, I actually did a pretty good job.
Walter Benjamin was great. Krakauer is even hard for me to pronounce.
Thank you.
And there's also some sausage that sounds a bit like
that's
it.
where I got nervous. I was like, I'm saying a sausage. This can't be right.
They think that the city or architecture preserves the past and all of the past in a way. That means architecture is outdated when it's realized. It's an outdated vision of what the architect or the society had in mind when it was constructed. And like this, it preserves this vision, an utopia, but a utopia that has already is gone, left, dead, outdated. And that's only the architecture. On top of the architecture, in a way, you can see the traces of history. You can see, I don't know, the tiles that were shot during World War II or something like that, or just how many people used the subway station, for example. And these surfaces and the reflections about those surfaces have a valid philosophical point for Walter Benjamin especially, because he says that architecture and cityscapes preserve the remembrance of a city and the subconsciousness of society in total. Not only how we want to interact, how we trade goods, but also how we want to forget how we trade goods, for example.
What does that mean?
That forces or means of our productions are made invisible by the way we build cities, for example. And then there are other forces that make them visible again, so this is not this doesn't mean that you can't see it, but you have to look for it in a way.
And in terms of those forces of commerce or the forces that build it, as that economy changes, I mean, is there today still an impact on our architecture and the building of our city when people are moving here to? I mean, obviously we're building towers for Amazon and things like that. But when so many workers are going from home or co-working or working in startups, as opposed to factories. Factories seem like a thing that lends themselves to shared spaces or people coming and going at the same hour. Does that also sort of affect what we see and feel or how we we build our cities in the sense that you're speaking of?
I mean, I thought about what we already discussed a little, those halls dedicated to capitalist firms, the former Mercedes-Benz arena, now Uber arena. More closer to me is the Estrel Tower, where campus for startups is going to be built.
What is
I'm a
this?
bit afraid.
Yeah,
Estrel Tower.
Johnny.
You'll see it when you go on the Ringbahn between, I think.
I don't go on the Ringbahn.
What? What?
What are you talking about?
Well, you'll see it from the window of an Uber. Gosh, what is that station? It's not Neukölln, it's not Treptower Park, it's in the middle.
Sonnenallee.
Thank you. It's right next to that.
Oh, so you
and
mean when I'm riding the M41?
Hey, buddy.
All right.
It's a big triangular building. I think it's designed
okay.
and owned by the Estrel family, if I'm correct. It's the largest hotel in Europe, and they're making it like twice as big. It's a massive thing.
Right,
you
right,
will
right. Okay,
know
I
it.
remember covering
You will
this
know
now.
it.
Yes.
Or you die.
Okay. And what that now is saying to us as the residents of the city, or how it's going to affect us, is to what? Just be another thing to see? I mean,
my fear is that it's close to the airport in a way, and it has a direct connection to the airport, and they are going to build a university for startups there. So I think this is a way of decentralized capitalism that tries to change the cityscape of Berlin. Yes.
But that's very vulnerable to start new, because I think this era is about existing city, and I come from a city which was, the inner city was bombed completely, so we thought we were out of history. But then I made a study in which I did go back, like a Röntgen photo of the city, 500 years, and every 50 years we looked about the structures, because the structures are still there. And we found out that the structures, if you take the structures serious, the successful structures in the past are successful now and in the future. And even if a location was 500 years long for different reasons successful, it's successful again. So we didn't know, why is the Marktal so popular? It's on that location, which was 500 years successful.
so it's like a ley line or
No,
something?
but that's why I think streets are so important, or boulevards or whatever. Structure. The structure of the city is our history. And buildings can go and come. Don't do it. But I mean, but the structures are even more important. So the structure of
The
Berlin,
structure meaning the underlying
the
map.
streets, the underlining, the city map. And of course, then if the more buildings who confirm this structure and tell about history is very important, because otherwise you don't even believe it. But the structures are key.
Right.
And,
And is the idea of centralization or decentralization, is that evaporating or changing? I mean, do we still need to all come to one point in the middle of the city, or is it about you're speaking to the decentralization with a certain amount of fear, but it's also a decentralization serves people who would rather be in the outskirts, or instead of being stuck in the outskirts, are just in a center that's outside the Ringbahn, or is there a balance between finding ways to meet in a middle, but also provide for people who are nowhere near it? Yeah, Johnny.
I don't think Berlin's a city where people do come and meet in the middle very often, to be honest. And that's because of its fairly recent past, in terms of the thing's about 800 years old, and only about 100 years ago we got the current borders, right? Roughly speaking. So that was the Greater Berlin Act. And so Lichtenberg, where I live, that wasn't part of Berlin until 1920, right? Neither was Neukölln. Neither was Spandau. Spandau's older than Berlin, right?
Right.
And so it is a city with lots of different centers. I'm one of the rare people, I think, that always goes to the center, because I do history tours. It makes people want to see the Brandenburg Gate. I can't move it, you know?
Yeah. It's been moved. Oh, yeah, okay, go ahead.
I brought it to my house. Do you want to come in? When I did have an office job, and especially during the pandemic, when I also lived alone, I didn't go into Mitte, right? I just sat in my apartment and I opened my laptop, and when I was like, okay, I'll go out for a walk because that's what you did during the worst of Corona, then yeah, you find that center that's near where you live, right? And I feel like not even every Bezirk is the same. Every kind of Kiez is the same, right?
Right.
You're one of the very unlucky people who happens to live in the middle of two Kiezes and feels like you don't have a neighborhood.
But is there a danger of segregation then?
Segregation, I don't think it's an enforced segregation. I think you've got natural, No, have you turned authoritarian? This discussion went weird. Did you want to say something?
No, yeah, that people go where people are. So where people meet already, that is the attraction. So the people are first. So when people like it, more people want to go there because they know that people like it. And that can be disastrous if tourists knows where people go because they can destroy it.
Sure,
because
but
then people go away again. So
tourists are an important part of this or any city other than, I guess, Copenhagen, because no one leaves, so they don't need tourists or something. But
they want tourists, but I pray for them that they don't get them.
Now I have a bad conscience that I mentioned Comenius-Garten because
yes,
it shouldn't be destroyed.
Don't worry. I don't think this podcast will have people running over it, but we can edit out that whole part, or we'll just bleep it. We'll bleep it, and then it'll create a mystique that's even better.
I once got an angry internet comment. I get them every day. It's great fun, the internet.
Yeah.
One of them was someone was very angry that I had told the world about the Muggelturm and the Muggelsee. There you go. It's a big place to overrun the Muggelsee.
Did your TikTok destroy it?
my TikTok destroyed it. I don't have a funnier answer. You nailed it.
So we're sort of coming to the end here, and I want to give each of you an opportunity to sneak in a last opinion or an important note on this idea. And really, if there is anything left about what you want or what you would like people to want as we consider Berlin and other cities moving forward.
Okay, I think people are...
Is it if you say trees and birds again?
Yeah, no, don't say trees and birds. I just did. I think that people now want the city. The cities are lively and they make people happy. So at this era, cities are very important biotopes to be in. That's why I'm very happy that the citizens are key in that. So too many tourists, for example, they take it over because you don't go to live where the tourists are because that's not the place to be. So, of course, when there are some tourists, they can be very attractive. That's nice, but too much is what the word says. Too much.
Okay.
So I think that we are now going to an era where people want to live nearby, where they live nearby, so they want everything nearby, and they don't have to fly to your sunny islands because they can have everything in the city and then take care of that city, and then it's their city, and then it's gonna be probably all right, and otherwise it's okay. We don't talk about the otherwise.
Okay, Johnny, when your tour groups are going through, are there places that hold their fascination where they don't want to move on? Is that something you see, or that were you ever surprised by how they interact with the city, or they did not surprise you anymore?
What are my surprises? Surprises are people want to see Checkpoint Charlie and then think that they had a good time. That's an impressive feat, but it happens on a daily basis. I do say to them the best way to see it is, within 10 minutes, and now you can leave. Gendarmenmarkt would always surprise me, and I learned this quite early on in my tour guide career. It's a big open space, or Not today, but usually it is.
Right.
And as I started to walk across it diagonally, this would happen every time. By the time I got to the other side, there'd be nobody with me. Because as soon as they entered this open space that's also pretty, and actually is very lacking in birds and trees, as it turns out, it's still nice. Yeah, it's kind of a weird opposite land. But people would just spread out because all of a sudden they've got this space and they want to take these photos, and they entered their own world very, very, very quickly in a way that doesn't happen at even Museum Island. And that's maybe because you've got more defined paths. You have to step up like half a meter to get onto the grass, so they'll naturally just follow you. But yeah, I'm interested to see how Gendarmenmarkt will look when it's finished. It's supposed to be finished in 3, 4, 5 months or so.
Sure, maybe.
Sure. I just banked on
By
next
the
year
Christmas
anyway.
market, which is lovely. Lea, are there thoughts that we need to make sure we've got into this?
What was the question to Martin again?
What is it that you're hoping
Yeah.
that we build into our ideas of
Yeah.
our future city? Because you said earlier, once we finish building it, it's sort of a thing of the past. And I also think that when people have, especially in Berlin, you see all of these sort of artifacts of people trying to build for the future, but they couldn't predict it. And so you think, oh yeah, that looks like it was futuristic when they did it, but also brutalism is weird and not what we need right now. So not to interrupt your answer, but I do want to see how we find a solution to this conundrum you brought up earlier.
Unfortunately, I only have a small one.
I'll take it.
Yeah, I think we should, for example, pay decent wages to bus drivers. That's a really big problem right now in Berlin. The infrastructure you also talked about, it's not only the underlining map of a city, but also the people who work and make the city work. And right now, it seems the administration doesn't care about them, and BVG doesn't pay enough. And I think those basic political needs have to be fulfilled.
I think that's an amazing answer, actually. That we need maybe less architecture and more great wages for the bus drivers who are the heroes of the city and connect us in ways that maybe a park never can because they move. We are about to end the podcast recording and have some lovely snacks and drinks. I know I'm hungry and thirsty. I'd love for all three of you to tell me a little bit about any current project or where our audience can learn more about the things we've discussed or things we didn't get a chance to because they weren't germane or because I interrupted you. Johnny?
One thing I would like to have added to the whole topic was what the kind of future of those public spaces would be, because I'm famously addicted to my phone. I spend more time with my phone than any human being that I know. And I often read about all these things in the past in Berlin and people going to all these boxing matches, football matches. I've been focusing on sport a lot lately, and dancing and big clubs and things. And I feel like people used to go out more because home used to be way more boring. Right. And I think home is continually getting not only more interesting because we've got the internet and everything, but we've also got everything we want when we want it. Even though I think Gorillas and Getir have announced today that they're folding.
Fantastic.
Yeah, but you can get everything delivered to your house. So you'll spend less time outside of it. And that means that outdoor spaces, public spaces are therefore competing with that and need to be better, interesting, different, more fun. I'm going to leave that to the designers.
I think that makes a lot of sense. But the other thing that public spaces have are other people. And I think as someone who's like went through the pandemic and works in building like the space we're in right now, or building audiences when we perform, is that AI can't replicate that. Netflix can't bring someone into your home. And while Gorillas, I guess, could bring them to your doorstep, it's not really going to be a social interaction. And so, I think spaces that allow people to gather without, we used to have amphitheaters, or that they still exist sometimes, that I think that that's something that we can do a better job of, is giving people these tools without having to buy a beer or a ticket and still hear people speak or interact. the library, you know, is a place that is increasingly becoming we were there last month, making noise. Martin?
Yeah, that's why I think streets are so important, because if you transform streets into lively places, with the trees and the birds.
Yes. Could we just start saying the bushes
no, but then
and the squirrels?
It's not only for us, but also for elderly people who come down and sit, because they just have to sit in front of their houses. The little children can play. So it's much more diverse than if you have to go to a park, because mostly elderly people...
And does that mean eliminating cars?
Yeah, and all my interviews in all kind of cities, they say you have two facades and in between there is a street,
right?
And it's filled up with cars, so we have to deal with the cars.
So just burn them, or do you have another?
There are some possibilities, but
okay, great, Martin, I love that.
But most of the answers I get, and also from Rotterdam, but Copenhagen, Barcelona, they say. In the meantime, people are not used that you can get around without a car. You must have parking garages. And in Paris, they say, a car? Oh no, I don't. It's so complicated to have a car.
Sure.
So,
do it with
I
the
never
accent
use it
little,
again.
Yeah.
So it's how you say, with drugs, it's verslaving.
With drugs?
It is an addiction. You need a car.
A car is an addiction.
I know a girlfriend who went with another girlfriend in Berlin on a trip, and this other girlfriend had a car.
Okay, I thought you were going to say drugs.
So of course they did go into the countryside. So we were packed and go to the girlfriend and say, okay, let's go. And she said, no, I hired a car. Because I have such a fantastic parking place, I never give it up.
Okay.
And I never thought about, I never use the car. So proud to have this parking place. That is the addiction to cars. So if you get rid of this addiction, you already get rid of half of the cars.
Yeah.
And then the other half can go to parking garages. And then you have your street for elderly people, for all kinds of
small animals that fly or don't.
Everybody.
Or raccoons and
exactly, dragons. Yes.
Okay. Wow. I like that word. The dragons can help to do the arson on the cars. So that's all an ecosystem that works as one.
And you understand it.
Thing. Thank you for saying that. That's very kind of you. Lea, we can find you at Strassenverlauf.
Yes, I agree that cars are weapons, and we should think about how and where we could use them and where we shouldn't. And one thing you said made me think. I don't think that public spaces and accessibility is something that is given, but something that has to be taken, that we have to fight for. So I don't think it's only a thing about architects, historians, intellectuals, or whoever discussing how can we make this possible, but also about what people and movements really do in their everyday life. And so I don't really have an answer, but that's why I don't have an answer.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. This ran long, but it's so much fun. And I guess, Lea, we'll see on May 1st. We can go take some public spaces. What do you say? Let's give it up for all of my guests today, Johnny and Martin and Lea, and for yourselves for coming out today.
Spaetkauf. Berlin News in English.